Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the observation deck of the research ship Endeavour, watching the planet below spin slowly in the darkness of space. The world looked peaceful from up here with its blue oceans and green continents, but Marcus knew that down there lived one of the most mysterious species the Galactic Council had ever encountered. The Kithara were bird-like beings who had refused contact with other species for over 200 years. They were proud, intelligent, and completely uninterested in joining the galactic community. Every attempt at communication had failed. Every diplomat had been politely but firmly sent away. Now it was Marcus's turn to try something different. "Dr. Chen, report to the briefing room," came the announcement over the ship's speakers. Marcus walked through the metal corridors of the ship, his footsteps echoing in the quiet halls. The briefing room was small and simple, with a large screen on one wall and a few chairs around a table. Captain Rivera was waiting for him, along with Ambassador Knox from the Diplomatic Corps. "Sit down, Marcus," Captain Rivera said. She was a tall woman with gray hair and kind eyes. "We need to discuss your mission." Marcus took a seat and looked at the screen, which showed images of the Kithara homeworld. Beautiful cities built into cliff faces, with towers that reached toward the sky like frozen waterfalls. "The Kithara live in a complex society," Ambassador Knox began. He was younger than the captain, with nervous hands that moved constantly as he spoke. "They organize themselves around family groups called nests. Each nest has a leader, usually a female, who makes decisions for the group." Marcus nodded. He had studied the basic information about the Kithara for weeks. "Your job," Captain Rivera continued, "is different from what we've tried before. Instead of formal meetings and diplomatic ceremonies, you're going to live near one of their nests and observe their daily behavior. Maybe if we understand them better, we can find a way to communicate." The screen changed to show a single Kithara female. She was magnificent, 8 feet tall with feathers that shifted from deep blue to silver in the light. Her wings were folded against her back, but Marcus could see they were powerful. Her eyes were large and intelligent, with an almost human-like awareness. "This is Zarathus," Ambassador Knox said. "She leads one of the most important nests in the northern continent. The local Kithara respect her greatly. If we can understand her behavior, we might learn how to approach her people." Marcus studied the image carefully. "What do we know about her specifically?" "Not much," Captain Rivera admitted. "She's never married, which is unusual for a leader of her age. She's known for being very intelligent and very careful about who she allows near her territory. The other Kithara seem to look up to her. Your observation post will be about half a mile from her nest," Ambassador Knox added. "Close enough to watch and record her activities, but far enough away that she shouldn't feel threatened. You'll have all the recording equipment you need, plus a translation device that can handle basic Kithara language." Marcus felt excitement building in his chest. This was exactly the kind of work he loved. Patient observation, careful study, learning about new forms of life. "How long do I have?" "As long as it takes," Captain Rivera said. "But Marcus, remember, you're there to observe only. Don't try to make contact. Don't interfere with their activities. Just watch and learn." 3 days later, Marcus found himself standing on the surface of the Kithara homeworld for the first time. The air was thin but breathable, with a slight sweetness that reminded him of mountain forests back on Earth. The sky was a pale green color, with 2 small suns casting interesting shadows across the landscape. His observation post was a small shelter made of materials that would blend in with the rocky surroundings. Inside, he had everything he needed: recording equipment, a comfortable sleeping area, food supplies for several months, and the translation device that would help him understand any Kithara speech he overheard. The nest of Zarathus was visible from his shelter's main window. It was built into the side of a tall cliff, with platforms and chambers carved directly into the rock. Colorful fabrics hung from some of the openings, moving gently in the wind. It was clearly the work of someone with both artistic sense and practical skill. For the first 2 days, Marcus saw very little of Zarathus herself. Occasionally, he would catch a glimpse of movement near the nest, or see a large shadow pass overhead as someone flew past. But mostly the area seemed quiet and peaceful. On the 3rd morning, everything changed. Marcus was eating his breakfast and reviewing his notes when he heard a sound like music coming from outside. He looked through his window and saw Zarathus standing on the largest platform of her nest, her wings spread wide. She was even more beautiful than the images had shown. Her feathers caught the morning light and seemed to glow from within. As Marcus watched, she began to move in what looked like a dance, her wings creating patterns in the air while she sang in a voice that was both powerful and gentle. Marcus quickly activated his recording equipment and began taking notes. This was exactly the kind of behavior he was here to study. The dance lasted for about 10 minutes, with Zarathus moving through what seemed to be a complex series of poses and gestures. When she finished, she stood still for a moment, looking directly toward Marcus's shelter. Even from this distance, he could feel the intensity of her gaze. Then she folded her wings and disappeared back into her nest. That afternoon, Marcus was surprised to find a collection of fruits arranged in a neat pile outside his shelter. They were local fruits, perfectly ripe and arranged in an attractive pattern. Marcus looked toward the nest but saw no sign of Zarathus. He made careful notes about the gift, took photographs, and collected samples for analysis. The fruits were delicious and clearly chosen with care. But what did it mean? Was this how the Kithara welcomed strangers to their territory? Or was there some other meaning he was missing? Over the next few days, the gifts continued. Sometimes it was fruit. Sometimes it was interesting stones arranged in geometric patterns. Sometimes it was flowers that filled the air with sweet scents. Each morning, Zarathus would perform her dance on the platform, and each afternoon, Marcus would find new gifts outside his shelter. Marcus documented everything carefully, but he was starting to feel puzzled. According to his research, the Kithara were supposed to be territorial and suspicious of outsiders. Yet Zarathus seemed to be going out of her way to be welcoming. On the 7th morning, the dance was different. Instead of staying on her platform, Zarathus flew to a rocky outcrop much closer to Marcus's shelter. Her movements were more elaborate, with dramatic swoops and turns that showed off her flying skills. Her feathers, which had been mostly blue and silver, now showed hints of deep red and gold. Marcus watched in fascination, recording every movement. The translation device was picking up fragments of her song, rendering them as phrases like strong observer and one who sees truly, and blessing from the sky. When the dance ended, Zarathus remained on the rocky outcrop for a long moment, looking directly at Marcus's shelter. Then, to his complete surprise, she began walking toward him. Marcus's heart raced. His instructions were clear: observe only, no contact. But what should he do if she approached him directly? He checked his translation device and made sure his recording equipment was running. Zarathus stopped about 20 feet from his shelter and tilted her head, studying him through the window. Her feathers had shifted to a deep crimson color that Marcus had never seen before. It wasn't in any of his reference materials. She spoke a single word in her musical language. The translator rendered it as greetings. Marcus realized he was holding his breath. This was it. First direct contact between himself and one of the Kithara. Everything he did next could affect the future relationship between their species. He raised his hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful greeting. Zarathus's feathers shifted to brilliant gold, and she sang a complex melody that the translator couldn't fully capture. Then she spread her wings, took flight, and returned to her nest. Marcus sat back in his chair, his heart still racing. Something important had just happened, but he wasn't sure what. As he began writing his report for the ship, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow's dawn dance more than ever. The days that followed brought changes that Marcus couldn't have predicted. What started as simple gift-giving quickly became something much more complex and puzzling. On the 8th morning, Marcus woke to find that Zarathus had been busy during the night. A second platform had appeared next to her main nest, carved into the cliff face with remarkable skill. The new platform was smaller than her main one, but perfectly positioned to overlook Marcus's shelter. Marcus studied it through his binoculars, making detailed notes. Subject appears to be expanding her territory, he wrote in his daily report. Possible response to observer presence. New construction suggests increased activity levels and possible territorial marking behavior. But as he watched, something strange happened. Instead of using the new platform herself, Zarathus began decorating it with the same kinds of gifts she had been leaving for Marcus. Colorful stones, sweet-smelling flowers, and carefully arranged fruits. Fascinating, Marcus muttered to himself, adjusting his recording equipment. She's created a secondary territory but isn't occupying it. Possible food storage area? Or perhaps a display meant to communicate territorial boundaries. That afternoon brought an even bigger surprise. Instead of leaving gifts outside his shelter as she had been doing, Zarathus flew directly to his location carrying a large, flat stone covered with what looked like a complete meal. There were several types of cooked meat, various fruits he hadn't seen before, and some kind of bread made from local grains. Marcus opened his shelter door cautiously. Zarathus stood a respectful distance away, her feathers showing soft blue and green colors. She gestured toward the food with one wing, then tilted her head as if asking a question. "Thank you," Marcus said, hoping his translation device would convey the meaning properly. He took the stone plate and examined the food carefully. Everything looked and smelled delicious. "This is very kind." Zarathus's feathers shifted to warm gold and she sang a brief melody before flying back to her nest. Marcus watched her go, puzzled by her behavior. According to his research, the Kithara were supposed to be cautious around strangers. Yet Zarathus seemed to be treating him like an honored guest. As he ate the meal, which was absolutely delicious, Marcus noticed movement in the distance. Other Kithara were arriving in the area, landing on nearby cliffs and rocky outcroppings. By evening, at least a dozen had gathered, all seeming to watch Marcus's shelter with great interest. The next morning brought even more confusion. During her dawn dance, Zarathus was joined by 3 other females, all performing elaborate movements on the platforms around her nest. But the most puzzling thing was the arrival of several young male Kithara. Unlike the respectful distance maintained by the females, the males seemed agitated. They flew in aggressive patterns around Marcus's shelter, calling out in harsh voices that his translator rendered as challenges and insults. One particularly bold male landed directly in front of Marcus's door and spread his wings in what was clearly a threatening display. Marcus stayed inside, recording everything and trying to make sense of what was happening. "Possible territorial dispute," he wrote. "Male subjects appear to view observer presence as threat to local hierarchy. Recommend maintaining low profile to avoid escalating situation." But the males weren't just threatening Marcus. They seemed to be challenging each other as well. Throughout the day, he watched them engage in aerial contests, elaborate flying displays that showed off their speed and agility. They dove from great heights, performed complex loops and turns, and called out in voices that sounded like boasts or taunts. Competitive behavior, Marcus noted. Possibly related to mating season or territorial rights. Observer presence may have triggered increased competition among males. He had no idea how close to the truth he was. The 4th week brought the most puzzling development yet. Zarathus began bringing Marcus his meals personally, flying to his shelter twice a day with carefully prepared food. But instead of simply leaving it and flying away, she now stayed for several minutes, attempting what could only be described as conversation. She would speak in her musical language, with the translator providing fragments like, "Strong wings need good food," and "The nest builder must eat well," and "Together we grow strong." Marcus assumed these were standard Kithara hospitality phrases, so he responded politely, thanking her for her kindness and complimenting her cooking skills. What Marcus didn't realize was that his responses were being translated into Kithara as acceptance of her offerings and praise for her nest-building abilities, both important elements of their courtship. Traditions, Zarathus's behavior became even more elaborate. She began grooming her feathers extensively before each visit, ensuring they showed their brightest colors. She started bringing not just food, but small decorative items, carved wooden figures, polished stones with interesting patterns, and flowers arranged in complex designs. "Subject appears to be treating observer as important visitor," Marcus wrote. "Increasing investment in gift-giving and social interaction suggests possible diplomatic significance. Recommend maintaining friendly but professional relationship to encourage continued cooperation." The other Kithara in the area were clearly watching these interactions with great interest. The females would gather on nearby platforms, chattering among themselves in excited voices. The males became increasingly hostile, with some attempting to intercept Zarathus during her flights to Marcus's shelter. One afternoon, Marcus witnessed what looked like an aerial battle between 2 young males. They collided in midair, talons locked, spinning wildly before separating and retreating to opposite sides of the canyon. Both were clearly injured, with ruffled feathers and labored flight patterns. Escalating territorial conflicts, Marcus noted with concern. Observer presence appears to be causing significant disruption to local social order. May need to request relocation to different observation site. But before he could send that recommendation, something happened that changed everything. On the morning of the 30th day, Zarathus approached his shelter carrying something Marcus had never seen before. It was an egg-shaped crystal, about the size of his fist, that seemed to glow with internal light. The surface was perfectly smooth and warm to the touch, with swirling patterns that shifted and changed as he watched. Zarathus held it carefully in both hands, speaking in a voice that was softer and more musical than usual. The translator struggled with her words, providing fragments like grandmother's gift and heart of the nest and bond beyond sky. She placed the crystal gently in Marcus's hands, her feathers showing the most brilliant gold he had ever seen. Then she stepped back and began the most elaborate song dance Marcus had witnessed, her movements graceful and powerful, her voice carrying across the entire canyon. When the song ended, every Kithara in the area, male and female alike, burst into loud calls that sounded like celebration. They flew in complex patterns around Zarathus's nest and Marcus's shelter, their voices creating a harmony that was both beautiful and overwhelming. Marcus stood holding the glowing crystal, completely bewildered by what had just happened. Zarathus watched him with bright, expectant eyes, her feathers still glowing gold. "Thank you," Marcus said, not knowing what else to say. This is beautiful. I'm honored that you would share something so precious with me." Zarathus's song of joy was so loud and pure that it echoed off the canyon walls. The other Kithara joined in, creating a celebration that lasted until sunset. That night, as Marcus examined the crystal and tried to understand its significance, he noticed that the new platform Zarathus had built was now decorated with the same kinds of fabrics and ornaments that adorned her main nest. It looked less like a storage area and more like living quarters. "Subject behavior increasingly difficult to categorize," he wrote in his report. "Recommend consultation with xenoanthropology specialists to better understand cultural significance of recent interactions." Marcus fell asleep holding the warm crystal, completely unaware that in the eyes of every Kithara in the region, he had just accepted a marriage proposal. Marcus woke on the 31st day to a sound he had never heard before. Dozens of Kithara voices singing together in perfect harmony. He rushed to his window and couldn't believe what he saw. The entire canyon had been transformed overnight. Colorful banners hung between the cliff faces, fluttering in the morning breeze. Platforms that had been empty were now decorated with flowers and glowing crystals. At least 50 Kithara filled the area, all wearing what appeared to be ceremonial ornaments, polished metal bands around their wings, jeweled necklaces, and crowns made of precious stones. "What in the world?" Marcus muttered, reaching for his recording equipment. At the center of all the activity, Zarathus stood on her main platform wearing the most elaborate decorations Marcus had ever seen. Her feathers had been arranged in intricate patterns with small gems woven throughout. A cape of silver fabric flowed from her shoulders, catching the light as she moved. An elderly female Kithara approached Marcus's shelter, walking with the slow dignity of great age. Her feathers were silver white, and she wore a crown that seemed to be made of pure starlight. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Marcus activated his translator quickly. The device struggled with her formal speech patterns but managed to convey the general meaning. "Honored observer, we gather to witness the bonding ceremony of Zarathus and the Skywalker Marcus. May their union bring strength to both nests." Marcus stared at the translation display, certain it had malfunctioned. "I'm sorry," he said carefully, "but I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm here to observe and study your culture. I'm not participating in any ceremony." The elderly female's expression changed from formal politeness to confusion. She spoke again, more sharply this time. "You accepted the heart crystal. You shared her food and praised her nest building. You slept beneath the platform she built for you. How do you claim no bond?" Marcus felt a cold chill run down his spine. Heart crystal? Platform built for him? Suddenly, all of Zarathus's behavior over the past month began to look very different. "There's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said, his voice rising with panic. "I'm a scientist. I was observing your customs, not participating in them. I didn't know those actions had romantic meaning." The translation of his words caused an immediate reaction. The elderly female stepped backward as if she had been struck. Her feathers shifted to a dark red color that Marcus's database identified as anger. She spoke rapidly to the other Kithara, and within moments the entire gathering was buzzing with agitated conversation. Zarathus flew down from her platform, landing directly in front of Marcus's shelter. Her beautiful ceremonial decoration seemed to mock the confusion and hurt in her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but the translator caught every word. "You reject me? After accepting my heart gift? After eating from my hands? After sleeping in the nest I built for you?" No, Marcus said desperately. "I'm not rejecting you. I didn't understand. Where I come from, those actions mean something different. I thought you were being friendly, showing hospitality to a visitor." But his explanation only made things worse. The elderly female translated his words to the crowd, and the reaction was explosive. Some Kithara called out in angry voices. Others took flight immediately, clearly wanting nothing to do with the situation. A few young males who had been hostile before now looked ready for violence. "Hospitality?" Zarathus repeated, her feathers shifting to deep purple, a color Marcus had never seen before but instinctively recognized as heartbreak. "You thought my heart gift was hospitality? You believed my nest building was mere politeness?" Marcus tried to explain, but everything he said made the situation worse. When he mentioned that humans often ate together without it meaning anything romantic, the Kithara were horrified. When he tried to describe human dating customs, they seemed disgusted by what they saw as casual and disrespectful behavior. "Your species builds no nests for their chosen ones?" the elderly female demanded. "You give no precious gifts? You perform no dances of devotion? How do you show worthiness for bonding?" Marcus realized that human courtship rituals, dinner dates, movies, casual conversation, sounded primitive and meaningless when translated into Kithara concepts. Everything he said to defend his species only convinced them that humans were incapable of the kind of deep, respectful bonding that Kithara valued. Within an hour, the celebration had turned into something that felt like a funeral. The decorations were taken down with angry efficiency. The ceremonial ornaments were packed away. Most of the visiting Kithara departed without another word, their wing beats creating harsh sounds as they flew away in disgust. Zarathus stood alone on her platform, still wearing her bonding decorations but looking small and defeated. She had removed the gems from her feathers, letting them fall to the ground like tears. When she finally spoke, her words were formal and cold. "Observer Marcus, you have shown that your species cannot understand the sacred bond between nest partners. You may continue your studies, but you are no longer welcome in my territory after the next dawn." Marcus spent the rest of the day trying to salvage the situation. He sent urgent messages to the Endeavor, explaining what had happened and requesting immediate guidance. The responses he received were not encouraging. Captain Rivera's message was brief. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving diplomatic protests from multiple Kithara territories. They're calling humans bond breakers and false hearts. The Galactic Council is demanding explanations. Fix this immediately." Ambassador Knox was even more direct. "Marcus, you've created an interspecies incident. The Kithara are now refusing all contact with human diplomats. They're telling other species that humans are untrustworthy in matters of personal honor. Our application for council membership may be rejected because of this." As night fell, Marcus sat in his shelter holding the heart crystal that had started all the trouble. It still glowed with warm light, still felt smooth and precious in his hands. He could see Zarathus on her platform, no longer wearing her beautiful decorations, sitting alone in the darkness. Other Kithara had gathered on distant cliffs, but they were no longer watching with friendly interest. Their body language was hostile, their occasional calls sounding like warnings or threats. Marcus realized that he wasn't just unwelcome in Zarathus's territory. He was now seen as a danger to their entire way of life. The worst part was that he could see Zarathus was genuinely hurt. This wasn't just about diplomatic protocol or cultural misunderstanding. She had opened her heart to him, offered him the most precious things in her world, and from her perspective, he had rejected all of it as meaningless. Marcus looked at his research notes, all his careful observations about territorial behavior and social customs. How could he have been so blind? How could a trained scientist miss something so obvious? As he prepared for what might be his last night on the Kithara homeworld, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't undo the hurt he had caused, and he couldn't change the diplomatic damage that had been done. But maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to bridge the gap between their species. The heart crystal pulsed with gentle light in his hands as if responding to his thoughts. Tomorrow he would either find a solution or watch humanity's first chance at joining the galactic community disappear forever. Outside, Zarathus began to sing, not the joyful songs of celebration, but a haunting melody that spoke of loss and broken dreams. The sound carried across the canyon, and Marcus knew that every note was meant for him. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at his desk, surrounded by weeks of research notes, recordings, and observations. The heart crystal glowed softly beside him, its warm light illuminating pages covered with his careful handwriting. For the first time since arriving on the Kithara homeworld, Marcus stopped thinking like a scientist and started thinking like a human being who had hurt someone he cared about. He read through his notes again, but this time he looked for different patterns. Instead of territorial behaviors and social hierarchies, he searched for signs of affection, devotion, and courtship. What he found made his chest tight with regret. Every gift Zarathus had brought him was rare and precious. The fruits came from trees that grew only on the highest mountain peaks. The stones were polished smooth by hand, each one chosen for its perfect color and shape. The flowers she picked bloomed for only one day each year, making them incredibly valuable. Her dances weren't territorial displays. They were performances meant to show her grace, strength, and beauty. Each morning she had risen before dawn to prepare herself, arranging her feathers and practicing her movements until they were perfect. The platform she built wasn't for storage or territory expansion. Marcus pulled up his architectural scans and realized it was designed as living quarters, with spaces for sleeping, eating, and working. She had carved it by hand, shaping every surface with artistic care. "She built me a home," Marcus whispered to himself, understanding flooding through him. She wasn't expanding her territory. She was making space for both of us. But the knowledge of what he had missed wasn't enough. Marcus needed to find a way to fix the damage he had caused, both to Zarathus personally and to the diplomatic relationship between their species. He activated his communication device and sent a message to the Endeavor. "Captain Rivera, I need detailed information about human courtship traditions, wedding ceremonies, and bonding rituals. Also, request cultural database on symbolic gestures of commitment across known species. Urgent." While waiting for the response, Marcus began working on something he had never attempted before, understanding the Kithara concept of worthiness in bonding. From his observations, he could see that Kithara courtship was about proving dedication through action. The male who wanted to bond with a female had to show he could provide for her, protect her, and commit his entire life to building something together. It wasn't about casual attraction or temporary feelings. It was about creating a partnership that would last forever. Marcus realized that his human perspective had completely missed the depth of what Zarathus was offering. In her culture, bonding wasn't just about two individuals. It was about joining two lives so completely that they became one nest, one future, one shared dream. The response from the Endeavor arrived as the first sun began to rise. Captain Rivera had sent everything he requested, along with a personal message. "Marcus, whatever you're planning, you have about 6 hours before the Kithara delegation arrives to formally declare humans unfit for galactic membership. Make it count." Marcus spread the cultural information across his desk and began to work. If he couldn't undo his mistake, maybe he could create something new, something that honored both human and Kithara traditions, while showing that the two species could understand each other. He started with what he knew about engineering and design. Since he couldn't fly like the Kithara, he would need to create something that moved through the air in a different way. Marcus pulled out his portable fabrication unit and began building the most important project of his life. Working with materials from his scientific equipment, Marcus constructed a complex kinetic sculpture. It used small drones and holographic projectors to create patterns of light that could move through 3 dimensions. The design was based on the flight patterns he had observed during Kithara courtship dances, but adapted for human technology. Next, he analyzed the musical frequencies of Kithara songs and programmed his instruments to create harmonies that would translate properly to their hearing range. He couldn't sing their complex melodies, but he could compose mathematical music that spoke to their understanding of beauty and precision. The hardest part was writing what he wanted to say. Marcus knew that his words would be the most important he had ever spoken, and they needed to bridge two completely different ways of understanding love and commitment. As the suns climbed higher in the sky, Marcus could see Kythera gathering on the distant cliffs. Word of his deadline had spread, and they were coming to witness either his departure or his attempt to make amends. Zarathus remained on her platform, but Marcus could see that she was watching his shelter. Her feathers showed the dull gray color of sadness, and she had not performed her morning dance. By midday, Marcus had finished his preparations. The kinetic sculpture was programmed and tested. The musical composition was loaded into his instruments, and his speech was written and memorized. His hands shook slightly as he made his final checks, knowing that everything depended on the next few minutes. Marcus stepped outside his shelter carrying the heart crystal and his equipment. Immediately, every Kythera in the canyon turned to watch him. The silence was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. He looked up at Zarathus and spoke clearly, his voice amplified so everyone could hear. Zarathus, noble leader, builder of beautiful homes, I come before you and your people to admit my terrible mistake, and to ask for a chance to show you the truth of my heart. Zarathus's feathers shifted slightly, showing the first color he had seen from her all day. I am human, Marcus continued, and I did not understand the sacred meaning of your gifts. When you brought me food, I thought only of nourishment. When you built me a home, I saw only construction. When you gave me your heart crystal, I understood only its beauty, not its promise. He activated his kinetic sculpture, and patterns of light began dancing through the air above his head. They moved in spirals and loops that echoed Kythera flight patterns, but with a precision and complexity that only human technology could achieve. But now I understand, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. You were not showing me hospitality. You were showing me love. You were not expanding territory. You were building our future. You were not giving gifts. You were offering your heart. The light patterns grew more elaborate, painting pictures in the air of two different species learning to fly together. At the same time, Marcus's instruments began playing the mathematical music he had composed, creating harmonies that resonated through the canyon. I cannot fly as you do, Marcus said, but I can create flight with my hands and mind. I cannot sing your songs, but I can compose new music that speaks to both our species. I cannot offer you a traditional Kythera bonding, but I can give you something that has never existed before, a partnership that celebrates what makes us different while building on what makes us the same. The sculpture reached its climax, with lights forming the shape of two figures, one winged, one not, dancing together in patterns that belonged to neither species but somehow honored both. Marcus raised the heart crystal above his head, its glow matching the lights of his creation. Zarathus, I cannot undo the hurt I caused through my ignorance, but I can promise you this: if you will teach me your ways, I will share mine with you. If you will show me how to be worthy of your heart, I will spend my life proving that love can exist between the stars. The canyon fell completely silent as the lights faded and the music ended. Marcus stood holding the crystal, his fate in the hands of a being whose heart he had broken through simple, terrible misunderstanding. Zarathus rose slowly from her platform, her feathers beginning to show the faintest hint of gold. The silence stretched across the canyon like a held breath. Every Kythera watched as Zarathus stood on her platform, her feathers slowly shifting from gray to the faintest shimmer of gold. Marcus held the heart crystal steady, waiting for her response, knowing that the future of two species rested in this moment. Zarathus spread her wings and took flight, but instead of the graceful soaring Marcus had grown used to, she flew in short, hesitant movements. She landed on a rocky outcrop halfway between her nest and his shelter, close enough that he could see the uncertainty in her large, intelligent eyes. Marcus of the humans, she said, her voice carrying across the canyon. Your words are beautiful and your light dance shows great skill, but words and displays are easy things. How do I know you truly understand what you ask? The elderly female who had spoken to Marcus the day before flew down to join Zarathus. Her silver-white feathers caught the sunlight as she landed with the dignity of her years. Young nest leader speaks wisely, the elder said, her formal tone making it clear she was addressing not just Marcus, but the entire gathering. This human claims understanding, but yesterday he called our most sacred bonding rituals mere hospitality. How has one night changed such deep ignorance? Marcus felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. He could see other Kithara arriving on distant cliffs. Word was spreading that something important was happening. In the far distance, he spotted the distinctive shapes of diplomatic shuttles approaching. The galactic representatives were coming to witness either humanity's acceptance or rejection. "You're right to question me," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "One night cannot replace a lifetime of misunderstanding, but one night can begin a journey of learning." He walked closer to where Zarathus and the elder stood, moving slowly to show he meant no threat. "In my culture, we have a saying, the longest journey begins with a single step. Yesterday, I was a scientist observing from a distance. Today, I am a human asking to be part of something greater." Zarathus tilted her head, a gesture Marcus now recognized as careful consideration rather than simple curiosity. "What do you offer that is different from what you offered yesterday?" she asked. Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment everything depended on. Yesterday, I offered nothing because I understood nothing. Today, I offer partnership, not the traditional Kithara bonding because I am not Kithara, and not human marriage because you are not human. I offer something new. He activated his translation device to its most precise setting, knowing that every word had to be perfect. "I offer to learn your language until I can speak it like music. I offer to study your culture until I understand not just your customs, but the wisdom behind them. I offer to build not just a nest for two, but a bridge between our species." The elder's feathers shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. "Pretty words, young human. But what would this bridge look like? How do you propose to honor both our ways?" Marcus smiled, feeling more confident now that they were willing to listen. "I propose we create the first interspecies cultural center, a place where humans can learn Kithara arts, philosophy, and ways of living, where Kithara can explore human science, technology, and methods of understanding the universe." He gestured toward the platform Zarathus had built for him. "That beautiful home you created. What if it became the first classroom where our species learn from each other? What if instead of one human observing from a distance, we had teams of humans and Kithara working together, teaching together, building together?" Zarathus's feathers were definitely showing gold now, though she tried to keep her voice neutral. "And what would your role be in this? Cultural center?" "Whatever role you think I'm worthy of," Marcus said honestly. "If you'll have me as a partner in this work, then I'll spend my life proving that love between species isn't about being the same. It's about choosing to build something beautiful from your differences." A new voice joined the conversation. Captain Rivera's shuttle had landed nearby, and she approached with Ambassador Knox and a delegation of both humans and other galactic species. "Dr. Chen," Captain Rivera said formally, "the Galactic Council has sent representatives to evaluate humanity's fitness for membership. I believe they would be interested in hearing your proposal." Among the delegation was a tall, crystalline being that Marcus recognized as a member of the Council's ruling body. When it spoke, its voice resonated like chiming bells. "Human Marcus," the being said, "your species stands accused of cultural insensitivity and diplomatic incompetence. However, we have observed this morning's proceedings with great interest. If the Kithara are willing to accept your proposal, the Council would view it as evidence of humanity's potential for growth and understanding." All eyes turned to Zarathus. The decision that would affect millions of lives across the galaxy rested with one Kithara female who had offered her heart to a confused human scientist. Zarathus looked at the heart crystal still glowing in Marcus's hands, then at the platform she had built with such hope, then finally at Marcus himself. "You hurt me deeply," she said quietly. "When you rejected what I offered, it felt like you were saying I was worthless, that my feelings meant nothing." Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I would do anything to take back that pain." "But," Zarathus continued, her feathers now definitely gold, "I have watched you these past months. Even when you misunderstood everything, you were respectful, kind. You treated me as an equal, not as something to be studied. That is why She paused, searching for words. "Why I chose you." She spread her wings and flew to Marcus, landing directly in front of him. Reaching out with one wing, she gently touched the heart crystal in his hands. "I accept your proposal, Marcus of the humans. Not for traditional bonding, but for something new. We will build this bridge together, and perhaps we will discover what love looks like when it crosses the stars." The canyon erupted in celebration. Kythera voices rose in harmony while the galactic delegation applauded. Captain Rivera wiped away tears as Ambassador Knox frantically took notes. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the main hall of the Chen Zarathes Cultural Center, watching as the first group of human students practiced Kythera flight meditation, while a group of young Kythera worked on human mathematical equations. The center had become everything they had dreamed of and more. Humans learned Kythera arts, philosophy, and environmental harmony. Kythera studied human science, engineering, and exploratory methods. Both species discovered that their different approaches to problems often led to solutions neither could have found alone. Zarathes approached from the advanced linguistics classroom, where she had been teaching Kythera poetry to a mixed group of students. Her feathers showed the warm gold that Marcus had learned meant contentment and joy. "The new students from the Southern Territories arrived this morning," she said, settling beside him on the observation platform they shared. 15 young ones eager to learn about human space travel techniques. Marcus smiled, watching a human engineer and a Kythera artist collaborate on a sculpture that seemed to defy both gravity and logic. "And the council approved our expansion proposal?" "Unanimously," Zarathes said, her voice filled with pride. 3 more centers on 3 different worlds. They want to use our model for all future interspecies cultural exchange programs. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their dream become reality. The platform where they lived and worked was neither fully human nor fully Kythera, but something entirely new. A space that celebrated both their differences and their shared commitment to building bridges between worlds. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked softly. "Choosing this path instead of a traditional bonding?" Zarathes's feathers shifted to the brilliant gold that had become Marcus's favorite color in the universe. "Never," she said. "We created something that never existed before. A love that spans species, a partnership that changes worlds. What could be more beautiful than that?" As the 2 suns set behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors both their species found beautiful, Marcus realized that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from careful observation, but from the courage to become part of what you're trying to understand. The heart crystal, now permanently displayed in the center's main hall, pulsed with warm light, a symbol of the moment when misunderstanding became the foundation for something entirely new.